The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a rifle shot across the town square of Harlow Creek, and Ruth Ann Weaver flinched for the last time that morning. She had promised herself she would not flinch again. She stood on the courthouse steps beside her dead uncle's furniture, a scarred table, a broken clock, a plow with one handle, while the county gathered to watch her be sold along with the debts. Not sold, the auctioneer had corrected, smiling. Placed. As if there were a difference. As if the word changed the way the crowd looked at her. She kept her chin high. Her hands betrayed her, trembling against her patched gray skirt, so she folded them the way she had learned to fold them 20 years ago, standing on train platforms in 7 towns. The orphan train had carried her west through Kansas and Nebraska, stopping wherever families waited, and in 7 towns she had watched every other child get chosen. The pretty ones. The strong boys. The babies. Ruth had stood at the end of the line each time, holding her breath, practicing her smile, until the conductor's hand fell on her shoulder and guided her back aboard. 7 platforms. 7 times learning that hope was a thing you paid for later. Who'll take on the Weaver debts? The auctioneer called, and the girls keep with them. She cooks, cleans, works like a mule. Ask anybody. Laughter rippled through the crowd, women she had baked for, men whose fences she had mended when her uncle was too drunk to stand. Someone shouted a cruel figure. Someone else shouted a crueler one. Ruth stared at the mountains beyond the church steeple and tried to make herself into weather, into distance, into anything that could not be bid on. Then the laughter stopped. Elias Reed came through the crowd the way a slow river moves through stone, without hurry, without apology. The town's horse doctor. The widower from the high ranch. He was a big man gone quiet in his grief, a scar running pale from his left ear into his collar, and he did not look at the furniture or the plow. He looked at Ruth and he took off his hat. I'll settle the whole debt, he said. Every dollar. He turned to the crowd then and his voice never rose. And any man who laughs again at a woman standing alone will answer for it before supper. The square went silent as a held breath. He paid at the courthouse table, counting bills worn soft from his pocket. Then he stood before her, hat in his hands, and said the strangest thing anyone had ever said to Ruth Ann Weaver. I've got 3 children and a house that's forgotten how to be warm. I'm not asking for a servant. I'm asking for a wife, if you'll have a scarred man and his broken little family. Today before the judge, so no one can say you belong to anybody's debt ever again. She searched his weathered face for the trick, the trapdoor, the fine print written in every kindness she had ever been offered. She found only a tired man with patient eyes. And because she had nowhere left to fall, she said yes. They were married by noon. By lamplight that evening she stood in the kitchen of the Reed Ranch house, in a home that smelled of cedar and old grief, and gave him the only honesty she owned. I need you to understand something, Mr. Reed. I can't remember being loved. Not once. Not by anyone. Don't expect me to know how to give it. Elias set 2 cups of coffee on the table, slow and deliberate, as if her words were horses that might spook. Then watch, he said. My children and I will remind you. He looked at his hands. Before my wife passed, she made me promise to find someone the world threw away and love her the way no one ever did. I keep my promises, Ruth. Even the ones I don't fully understand yet. She didn't believe him. Belief was a luxury for people with different childhoods. But the children never asked her permission to prove him right. 6-year-old Maggie, who had not spoken a single word since her mother's burial 2 winters past, began leaving her rag doll outside Ruth's door each night, a small cotton sentry. 8-year-old Caleb and 10-year-old Samuel walked her to the henhouse each morning like an honor guard, and when a schoolyard boy called her the auction bride, Samuel came home with a split lip and refused to say he was sorry. Wildflowers appeared on her pillow, crooked-stemmed and clumsy. Ruth would hold them at arm's length, waiting for them to be taken back, the way everything had always been taken back. One evening she caught herself humming while kneading bread, and stopped as if she'd been slapped. Happiness felt like trespassing. Then Cordelia Vance stepped off the Tuesday stage in black taffeta, and the temperature of the whole valley seemed to drop. The late wife's sister swept through the ranch house touching things, the china, the curtains, the children's hair, like a woman taking inventory. Her eyes found Ruth last and lingered longest. So this is what my sister's home has come to, she said softly. An auction block bride with her hand on the family silver. The children deserve blood, Mr. Reed. Proper raising. I intend to see they get it. She smiled the way frost smiles on a window. One way or another. That night Ruth lay awake listening to the wind work at the shutters. Past midnight, an orange light flickered against her ceiling, wrong, moving, alive. She rushed to the window and saw smoke boiling up from the barn, flames licking the hayloft door. And across the yard, in the guest room window, stood Cordelia's silhouette. Not running. Not shouting. Just watching, still as a portrait as the fire began to climb. They saved the barn by dawn, Ruth hauling water beside Elias until her palms blistered, but they could not save what came after. Fever swept through Harlow Creek with the first hard snow, and the town needed someone to blame. Cordelia gave them someone. She moved through sewing circles and church pews like a black-gloved whisperer. The auction bride had brought misfortune, brought fire, brought sickness. When all 3 Reed children burned with fever in the same week, the whispers hardened into scripture. Ruth never left their bedside. For 4 nights she pressed cool cloths to their foreheads, spooned broth between cracked lips, and rocked little Maggie through the worst of the shaking hours. Somewhere past midnight on the worst night, with the wind screaming and Caleb calling for his dead mother, Ruth began to whisper the words no one had ever whispered to her. I choose you. I choose you. I choose you. Over and over, like a hymn, like a heartbeat, until the fevers broke at sunrise and she wept into her apron where no one could see. The town did not care that she had saved them. The sheriff arrived on a gray morning with an apologetic mouth and a warrant, and found Mrs. Vance's stolen pearl brooch tucked beneath the linings of Ruth's trunk, exactly where Cordelia had sworn it would be. There were letters too, forged in a careful hand, in which Ruth bragged to an unnamed man about bleeding the Reed ranch dry. Elias burned the letters in the stove and told the sheriff to get off his land. But Ruth saw the town's eyes at the mercantile. She saw Samuel's fresh bruises. She saw what her presence was costing the only people who had ever been kind to her, and she made the oldest decision an unwanted child knows how to make. Leave before you are left. She packed her few belongings in the dark and stood on the train platform at dawn, ticket trembling in her glove, becoming for the 8th time in her life the girl nobody kept. The whistle sounded down the valley. And then, cutting through the steam and the cold, came a voice small and rusty as an unopened gate. Mama said you'd come. Don't go. Ruth turned. Maggie stood at the end of the platform in her nightgown and untied boots, having run the whole way, speaking for the first time in 2 years. Mama told me before heaven, the child said, each word cracking like ice on a spring river. She said a lady was coming who needed us. Don't go. Please don't go. Ruth's ticket fell to the boards. She crossed the platform and gathered the girl up, and whatever froze inside her on 7 train platforms long ago finally, violently thawed. It was Maggie who led her to the answer, to her mother's cedar desk and the locked bottom drawer Elias had never had the heart to open. Inside, Ruth found orphanage correspondence 20 years old, and her own name written in a stranger's loving hand. Elias's late wife had once petitioned to adopt the child from the orphan train. Ruth Ann Weaver, age 6, 7 times passed over. The petition had been blocked, sabotaged by the sister who controlled the family purse and refused to see money wasted on a nameless stray. Cordelia. The woman destroying Ruth now was the same woman who had stolen her one chance at a family then. The dying promise had never been vague. Find someone the world threw away. Find her. Ruth was still holding the papers when Samuel burst in, white-faced. Maggie was gone, taken from the yard. A note pinned to the fence post gave terms in elegant script. The deed to the Reed Ranch, signed over by nightfall, delivered by Elias alone to the old mill. Cordelia had a partner now revealed, Ambrose Kittering, the land speculator who had been buying up the valley, and they had grown desperate enough to bargain with a child. A storm was breaking over the mountains, but Ruth did not wait for Elias to return from the far pasture. She rode into the wind with the orphanage papers buttoned inside her coat, because she alone understood what Cordelia feared more than the law, the truth. At the mill she walked in unarmed, rain streaming from her hair, and offered a trade, herself and her silence for the child. Cordelia only laughed. Then Ruth laid the 20-year-old papers on the millstone, and the laughter died. Everyone will know what you stole from your own sister, Ruth said quietly. Let the girl go or I'll spend my life making sure of it. Kittering drew a pistol. And the mill door exploded inward. Elias, the boys and the sheriff behind him, who had spent 2 days quietly tracing the forged letters back to Cordelia's own stationery. In the lantern light, before witnesses, everything unraveled. The planted brooch, the fire, the partnership, the ancient theft of a little girl's future. Cordelia left Harlow Creek in the sheriff's wagon, and the town that had once auctioned Ruth stood in the rain and could not meet her eyes. Spring came green and forgiving to the valley. At the church gathering, before every soul in the county, Elias rose with his children around him and took Ruth's hand. This woman told me once she couldn't remember being loved, he said, his voice carrying to the last pew. I told her, then watch. My children and I will remind you. We intend to keep reminding her every day for the rest of her life. And Maggie, in her Sunday dress, reached up and took Ruth's other hand. Come on, Mama, she said. Sit with us. Ruth Ann Weaver, chosen at last, sat down with her family. Love, in the end, is not something you remember. It is something someone patient enough teaches you. One small kindness, one wildflower, one whispered, I choose you, at a time.